As you take your first breath this morning, a startling realization settles in. Nothing will ever be the same. The air feels heavier, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice something you've always ignored. You sit up, the sheets tangled around your legs, and for a moment you sense a presence in the room. Not a ghost, not a shadow, but something far more intimate. It's the echo of every thought you've tried to silence, every impulse you've buried, every fear you've denied. It's the part of you that you've spent a lifetime pretending doesn't exist, and now it's awake. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the monster you've been running from has always lived inside you. Not a creature of fangs and claws, but a silent, persistent force, an undercurrent of rage, envy, shame, or longing. Picture yourself opening your eyes to a world where the boundaries between good and bad blur, where the stories you've told yourself about who you are begin to unravel. You find yourself standing at the edge of a new reality, the truth dawning on you all at once. The enemy is not out there, it's within. You've spent years constructing walls, painting over the cracks, rehearsing the lines of a script written by someone else. You've learned to smile when you want to scream, to nod when you want to rebel, to shrink when you want to expand. You've been taught that certain feelings are unacceptable, that certain desires are dangerous, that certain parts of yourself must be exiled if you want to belong. But what if the very act of banishing these parts has made them stronger? What if the monster grows in the darkness, feeding on your denial, waiting for the moment when your guard slips and it can finally speak? There is a paradox at the heart of your existence. The more you try to destroy your inner monster, the more it controls you. The more you suppress your anger, the more it leaks out in unexpected ways. The more you deny your envy, the more it poisons your relationships. The more you hide your shame, the more it shapes your choices. You are caught in a cycle of resistance and surrender, repression and eruption, self-control and self-betrayal. You are both the jailer and the prisoner, the hero and the villain, the creator and the destroyer. Why do you fear your own darkness? Who taught you that wholeness means purity, that strength means never faltering, that love means never hating? What if the parts of yourself you've labeled as monstrous are not flaws to be eradicated, but messengers bearing gifts you've refused to receive? What if your rage is a cry for justice, your envy a longing for growth, your shame a plea for compassion? What if the monster is not here to destroy you, but to save you from a life half-lived? As you sit in the quiet of the morning, the questions multiply, each one more unsettling than the last. What if the monster is not your enemy, but your oldest companion? What if it knows things about you that you've forgotten? What if it holds the key to your deepest power, your wildest creativity, your most authentic self? What if befriending your inner monster is the only way to become whole? You remember the stories you were told as a child. Stories of heroes slaying dragons, of saints resisting temptation, of good triumphing over evil. You were taught to root for the hero, to fear the monster, to believe that salvation lies in victory over the darkness. But what if those stories were only half true? What if the real journey is not about slaying the monster, but about listening to it? What if the path to freedom runs not away from your darkness, but straight through it? You feel a tremor of fear, a flicker of excitement, a surge of curiosity. What would happen if you stopped running? What would happen if you turned to face the thing you fear most? What would you see in its eyes? Would you find a reflection of your own pain, your own longing, your own humanity? Would you discover that the monster is not a beast to be caged, but a part of yourself that has been waiting to be loved? The room grows brighter as the sun rises, but the questions linger, casting long shadows across the floor. You realize that you are standing at the threshold of a new understanding, one that defies everything you've been taught. You sense that the journey ahead will not be easy, that it will demand courage, honesty, and a willingness to embrace discomfort. But you also sense that it is the only journey worth taking. You wonder, how many people spend their lives running from themselves? How many wars are fought? How many hearts are broken? How many dreams are abandoned because we cannot bear to face our own darkness? How much suffering is born from the refusal to acknowledge the monster within? And what would the world look like if we all learned to befriend our inner monsters, to listen to their wisdom, to integrate their power? You feel the weight of these questions pressing down on you, demanding answers that cannot be found in books or sermons or self-help slogans. You know that the answers must be lived, not learned, that they will emerge only through the slow, painful process of turning inward, of meeting yourself in the places you fear most. You sense that this is the work of a lifetime, and that it begins now, in this moment, with a single act of radical honesty. As you rise from your bed, you catch a glimpse of yourself in the mirror. For a moment, you see not just your face, but the flicker of something ancient and wild behind your eyes. You recognize the monster, not as an intruder, but as a part of you that has always been there, waiting for you to notice. You feel a surge of compassion, a whisper of understanding, a glimmer of hope. You realize that the journey ahead is not about conquering your darkness, but about making peace with it. It is about learning to hold the tension between light and shadow, to honor the complexity of your own nature, to embrace the paradox at the heart of your being. It is about discovering that true strength lies not in perfection, but in wholeness, in the willingness to be fully, unapologetically human. And so, as you step into the day, you carry with you a new question, one that will shape everything that follows. What does it mean to befriend your inner monster? What would it look like to welcome the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime rejecting? What gifts might they offer, if only you had the courage to listen? The world outside is unchanged, but you are not. You move through the day with a heightened awareness, attuned to the subtle currents of emotion and desire that flow beneath the surface. You notice the moments when your monster stirs, when anger flares, when jealousy bites, when fear tightens its grip. You resist the urge to push these feelings away, to pretend they don't exist. Instead, you pause, you listen, you ask, "What are you trying to tell me?" The answers do not come easily. Sometimes they do not come at all. But you sense that something has shifted, that a door has opened, that a new possibility has been born. You begin to see your monster not as a threat, but as a guide, a source of insight, a catalyst for growth, a reminder that you are more than the sum of your virtues and vices. As the day draws to a close, you find yourself standing once again at the edge of a new reality. The questions remain, unresolved and urgent, pulling you deeper into the mystery of your own existence. You sense that the journey has only just begun, that the path ahead will be marked by struggle and revelation, by moments of terror and moments of grace. But you are no longer afraid. You know that the monster is not your enemy, but your teacher. You know that the only way out is through. And you are ready to face the darkness, to embrace the paradox, to discover what it truly means to befriend your inner monster. The night falls, and you lie in bed, the questions swirling in your mind. You wonder, who am I, really? What am I capable of if I stop running from myself? What kind of life might I create if I learn to love the parts of myself I've been taught to fear? The answers are out there, waiting for you. All you have to do is begin. And so, with a sense of anticipation and dread, of hope and uncertainty, you close your eyes and take the first step into the unknown. The journey has begun. You wake the next morning with a lingering sense of unease, as if the questions from yesterday have woven themselves into your dreams. The world outside your window is unchanged. Cars pass, birds sing. The sun rises with mechanical indifference. But inside, something is shifting. You feel it in the pit of your stomach, in the restless energy beneath your skin. There is a presence, a tension, a silent war being waged beneath the surface of your consciousness. You sense that the monster within is not merely a personal quirk or a private shame, but the symptom of something deeper, older, and far more universal. You begin to wonder, why is it so hard to look your monster in the eye? Why does the very thought of embracing your darkness fill you with dread? What invisible force has convinced you that wholeness is dangerous, that authenticity is a risk, that your true self must be hidden at all costs? You search for answers, and the trail leads you back through the corridors of history, psychology, and philosophy. You find yourself standing in the shadow of thinkers who have wrestled with these questions long before you, men and women who have peered into the abyss and dared to speak of what they saw. Carl Jung whispers to you from the depths of the collective unconscious. He tells you that every human being carries a shadow, a hidden side composed of everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. The shadow is not evil, he insists, but it is dangerous when ignored. It is the sum of all that we have repressed, denied, or disowned. It is the monster we create by refusing to see ourselves whole. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, Jung warns, but by making the darkness conscious. You feel the weight of his words. You realize that your monster is not an aberration, but a natural consequence of being human. It is the inevitable result of a life spent trying to fit in, to be good, to be loved. From the moment you were born, you were taught which parts of yourself were acceptable and which were not. You learned to hide your anger, to swallow your grief, to mask your desire. You learned that love is conditional, that belonging requires sacrifice, that safety comes at the cost of authenticity. But the parts of yourself you banish do not disappear. They retreat into the shadows, growing stronger with every act of denial. They become the monster under the bed, the voice in the back of your mind, the impulse you cannot control. They haunt your dreams, sabotage your relationships, and shape your destiny in ways you cannot see. You remember Nietzsche, the philosopher who declared that whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. You realize that the war against your own darkness is a losing battle, that the harder you fight, the more you become what you fear. You see it in the world around you, the moral crusaders who become tyrants, the perfectionists who become paralyzed, the lovers who become possessors. You see it in yourself, the moments when your attempts at self-control turn into self-destruction, when your pursuit of virtue becomes a mask for your own hidden vices. You begin to suspect that the real problem is not the monster itself, but the way you relate to it. You have been taught to fear your own complexity, to seek safety and simplicity, to divide the world into good and evil, light and dark, self and other. But reality is not so easily divided. The monster is not a foreign invader, but a part of your own soul, a part that longs to be seen, heard, and understood. You think of Arthur Schopenhauer, who saw life as a ceaseless struggle between desire and suffering. He believed that the will, the blind, insatiable force that drives all living things, was the source of both our greatest joys and our deepest pains. You realize that your monster is the embodiment of this will, the part of you that wants, that hungers, that refuses to be tamed. You see that your suffering comes not from the existence of the monster, but from your refusal to acknowledge its power. You recall Aldous Huxley, who warned of the dangers of conformity and the loss of individuality in a world obsessed with order and control. You see how society rewards those who suppress their monsters, who play by the rules, who fit the mold. You see how the price of belonging is often the loss of self. You wonder how many people walk through life as shadows of themselves, haunted by the monsters they dare not name. You remember Jean-Paul Sartre, who insisted that existence precedes essence, that you are not defined by your past, your labels, or your roles, but by the choices you make in each moment. You realize that befriending your monster is not a one-time act, but a lifelong process of choosing authenticity over comfort, truth over illusion, wholeness over perfection. You think of Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the concentration camps and emerged with a radical insight that meaning is found not in the absence of suffering, but in the way we respond to it. You see that your monster is not an obstacle to meaning, but a gateway. It is the part of you that suffers, that struggles, that longs for something more. It is the part that makes you human. You begin to see the hidden problem for what it is, a conspiracy of silence, a culture of denial, a legacy of fear. You see how the world conspires to keep you small, to keep you safe, to keep you asleep. You see how the stories you've been told about good and evil, about strength and weakness, about love and hate, are designed to keep you from knowing yourself. You see how the monster is not just a personal problem, but a collective wound. You feel the weight of this realization pressing down on you, threatening to crush you with its enormity. You see how the monster shapes your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. You see how it drives you to seek approval, to avoid conflict, to numb your pain. You see how it whispers lies in your ear. You are not enough, you are too much, you are unlovable, you are alone. You see how these lies become self-fulfilling prophecies, shaping the course of your life in ways you cannot escape. You begin to understand that the monster is not just a part of you, but a part of everyone. It is the shadow that haunts every human heart, the wound that binds us all together. It is the price we pay for consciousness, for freedom, for the ability to choose. It is the source of our greatest suffering and our greatest potential. You wonder, what would happen if you stopped pretending? What would happen if you allowed yourself to feel the full weight of your own darkness? What would happen if you stopped running from your monster and started listening to it? What secrets might it reveal? What gifts might it offer? You sense that the answers lie not in the realm of reason, but in the realm of experience. You know that you cannot think your way out of this problem, that you must feel your way through it. You must be willing to sit with your discomfort, to face your fear, to embrace your own complexity. You realize that this is the work of a lifetime, a work that requires courage, patience, and compassion. You know that you will stumble, that you will fall, that you will be tempted to turn back, but you also know that there is no other way. The only way out is through. You feel the tension building, the pressure mounting, the sense of urgency growing. You know that you are standing on the edge of a precipice, that the next step will change everything. You sense that the consequences of ignoring your monster are far greater than you ever imagined, that the cost of denial is nothing less than your own soul. You are left with a choice: to continue living in the safety of illusion, or to risk everything for the sake of truth, to remain a prisoner of your own fear, or to step into the unknown and claim your freedom, to keep running from your monster, or to turn and face it once and for all. The choice is yours. The consequences are real. The time is now. And as you stand at the threshold, you feel the monster stirring within you, restless, hungry, alive. You sense that it is waiting for you to decide. You sense that the next step will reveal consequences you have never dared to imagine. You move through your day, outwardly unchanged, but inside, the tension coils tighter. The world expects you to perform your role, to smile, to nod, to keep the machinery of daily life running smoothly. Yet beneath the surface, the monster you've tried to ignore is no longer content to remain silent. It whispers in the spaces between your thoughts, in the pauses of your conversations, in the restless ache that follows you from room to room. You begin to notice the subtle ways it shapes your reality, not with a roar, but with 1,000 quiet manipulations. You start to see the unseen consequences of your lifelong war against yourself. They are everywhere, woven into the fabric of your existence, so familiar that you barely notice them. They are the reason you hesitate before speaking your mind, the reason you apologize for your own presence, the reason you sabotage your own happiness just as it comes within reach. They are the invisible hands that guide your choices, the silent architects of your suffering. You wonder, how much of your life has been lived in reaction to a fear you could never name? How many of your decisions have been shaped by the need to keep the monster at bay? You recall moments when you lashed out at someone you loved, only to regret it instantly. You remember the times you shrank from opportunity, convinced you were unworthy. You see now that these were not random failures, but the inevitable result of a mind at war with itself. The monster, denied and exiled, does not disappear. It becomes cunning, finding new ways to assert its presence. It seeps into your relationships, turning love into possession, trust into suspicion, intimacy into a battleground. It colors your perception of others, making you see threats where there are none, enemies where there are only friends. It whispers that you must protect yourself, that you must never let your guard down, that vulnerability is weakness. You begin to recognize the patterns, cognitive biases that twist your thinking, neurological shortcuts that keep you trapped. Confirmation bias makes you seek out evidence that you are unlovable, unworthy, irredeemable. Negativity bias ensures that every slight, every failure, every disappointment is magnified, while your successes fade into the background. The monster feeds on these distortions, growing stronger with every self-fulfilling prophecy. You see how cultural conditioning amplifies the problem. From childhood, you were taught to value control, to prize rationality, to distrust emotion. You learned that anger is dangerous, that sadness is weakness, that desire is shameful. You were rewarded for compliance, punished for rebellion, praised for self-denial. The monster learned to hide, to wear masks, to speak in riddles. It became the part of you that you could not show, the part that you could not love. You realize that the consequences of this denial are not just personal but collective. You see it in the world around you, in the violence that erupts when people can no longer contain their rage, in the addictions that numb the pain of unacknowledged wounds, in the prejudice that projects inner darkness onto others. You see it in the leaders who rule by fear, in the systems that demand conformity, in the cultures that worship perfection and punish vulnerability. You begin to understand that the monster is not just your own, but everyone's. It is the shadow that haunts every society, the wound that festers beneath every mask of civility. It is the reason why nations go to war, why families fall apart, why individuals self-destruct. It is the force that drives people to betray their own values, to hurt those they love, to destroy what they most desire. You feel the urgency of this realization. The monster is not content to remain hidden. It demands to be seen, to be heard, to be integrated. When denied, it becomes destructive, turning inward as depression, anxiety, self-loathing, turning outward as aggression, cruelty, indifference. The more you try to suppress it, the more it asserts itself, until your life becomes a series of crises, each one more desperate than the last. You see how the monster sabotages your dreams. It whispers that you are not good enough, that you will fail, that you do not deserve happiness. It convinces you to settle for less, to abandon your ambitions, to accept a life of quiet desperation. It tells you that safety is more important than fulfillment, that comfort is more valuable than growth. It keeps you small, afraid, and alone. You notice how the monster poisons your relationships. It makes you suspicious of kindness, wary of intimacy, quick to judge and slow to forgive. It turns love into a transaction, friendship into competition, community into a battlefield. It tells you that you must protect yourself at all costs, that vulnerability is a trap, that trust is for fools. It isolates you, even in a crowd, leaving you hungry for connection, but terrified of being seen. You realize that the monster shapes your identity. It becomes the voice in your head that tells you who you are and who you are not. It defines your limits, sets your boundaries, dictates your choices. It tells you that you are broken, flawed, unworthy. It convinces you that your darkness is a curse, not a source of power. It keeps you trapped in a story that is not your own. You begin to see the monster's fingerprints on every aspect of your life. It is there in the job you hate but cannot leave, in the relationship you cling to out of fear, in the dreams you abandon before they can disappoint you. It is there in the habits you cannot break, the patterns you cannot escape, the pain you cannot heal. It is the silent force that shapes your destiny, the unseen hand that guides your fate. You feel the weight of these consequences pressing down on you, suffocating you with their inevitability. You realize that the cost of denying your monster is nothing less than your own life. Every moment spent running from yourself is a moment lost, a possibility foreclosed, a dream deferred. The monster is not just a part of you, it is the part that holds the key to your freedom. You wonder what would happen if you stopped fighting. What would happen if you turned to face the monster, to listen to its voice, to understand its pain? What would you discover about yourself, about the world, about the nature of suffering and redemption? What new possibilities might emerge if you dared to embrace your own darkness? You sense that the answer is both terrifying and exhilarating. To befriend your monster is to risk everything, to let go of the illusion of control, to surrender the comfort of certainty, to step into the unknown. It is to accept that you are not perfect, that you are not always good, that you are capable of both great harm and great healing. It is to recognize that your darkness is not a flaw, but a source of wisdom, creativity, and strength. You begin to see that the monster is not your enemy, but your teacher. It is the part of you that refuses to be tamed, that demands to be heard, that insists on being real. It is the source of your passion, your courage, your resilience. It is the part that knows what you truly want, what you truly fear, what you are truly capable of. It is the part that will not let you settle for a life half-lived. You realize that the only way to escape the trap is to change your relationship with the monster, to stop seeing it as a threat and start seeing it as an ally, to stop running from your darkness and start learning from it, to stop denying your pain and start healing it, to stop fearing your own power and start claiming it. You feel the urgency of this realization building within you, a pressure that demands release. You know that the time for denial is over, that the cost of inaction is too great. You sense that the next step is not just a personal choice, but a collective imperative. The world cannot afford any more monsters in hiding, any more wounds left to fester, any more lives wasted in fear. You stand at the edge of a breakthrough, the tension at its peak. You sense that something is about to give, that a new possibility is about to emerge. You feel the monster stirring within you, restless and alive, waiting for you to make your move. You ask yourself, are you ready to break free? Are you willing to risk everything for the sake of wholeness? Are you prepared to face the consequences of your own liberation? The answer is not yet clear, but you know that the time has come to choose. You wake before dawn. The world outside still shrouded in darkness, but inside, something has shifted. The tension that once felt suffocating now crackles with possibility. You sense the monster within you, not as a threat, but as a presence. Alert, attentive, waiting. The old patterns tug at you, urging you to retreat into the familiar comfort of denial, but you resist. For the first time, you feel the stirrings of rebellion. You realize that the true act of courage is not to slay the monster, but to break the cycle of fear and avoidance that has defined your life. The rebellion begins not with a shout, but with a whisper, a quiet refusal to keep playing the same old game. You decide in this moment to stop running. You decide to turn and face the darkness, to meet your monster on its own terms. This is not the rebellion you were taught to expect. It is not a battle against an external enemy, not a quest for victory or domination. It is a revolution of perspective, a radical shift in the way you see yourself and the world. It is the willingness to question everything you thought you knew, to dismantle the stories that have kept you trapped, to risk the loss of certainty for the sake of truth. You begin by challenging the most fundamental assumption of all, that your darkness is your enemy. You ask yourself, what if the monster is not here to destroy you, but to guide you? What if its rage is a signal that something in your life needs to change? What if its envy is a signpost pointing toward your unlived potential? What if its shame is a plea for compassion, not punishment? You remember the words of Carl Jung, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. You realize that the rebellion is not about becoming someone else, but about becoming more fully yourself. It is about integrating the parts you have rejected, reclaiming the power you have disowned, embracing the complexity you have denied. It is about wholeness, not perfection. You look to history for examples of those who have broken free. You think of the artists who have transformed their pain into beauty, the activists who have turned their anger into justice, the mystics who have found divinity in their own darkness. You see that the path of rebellion is not new, but ancient, a path walked by those who have dared to face themselves, to embrace their contradictions, to live without apology. You recall the story of Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha not by fleeing his suffering, but by sitting with it, by looking it in the eye, by refusing to turn away. You remember the myth of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess who descended into the underworld, faced her shadow, and emerged transformed. You see that every true act of liberation begins with a descent, a willingness to enter the darkness, to confront the monster, to reclaim what has been lost. You begin to practice a new way of being. When anger rises, you do not suppress it or lash out. Instead, you pause, you breathe, you ask, what are you trying to tell me? When envy bites, you do not shame yourself or deny your longing. Instead, you listen. You ask, what do you desire that you have not allowed yourself to pursue? When shame tightens its grip, you do not hide or attack. Instead, you offer yourself compassion. You ask, what part of you is hurting, and how can you care for it? You discover that the monster is not a single entity, but a chorus of voices, each one carrying a message, each one holding a piece of your truth. You learn to distinguish between the voice of fear and the voice of wisdom, between the impulse to destroy and the impulse to create. You realize that your darkness is not a void, but a wellspring, a source of energy, insight, and transformation. You begin to reclaim your power. You stop apologizing for your existence, stop shrinking to fit the expectations of others, stop betraying yourself for the sake of approval. You learn to set boundaries, to speak your truth, to honor your needs. You discover that rebellion is not about violence or chaos, but about authenticity, the courage to live in alignment with your deepest values, no matter the cost. You notice the changes in your relationships. As you become more honest with yourself, you become more honest with others. You stop projecting your monster onto those around you. Stop blaming them for your own pain. Stop demanding that they fix what only you can heal. You learn to see the monster in others, not as a threat, but as a mirror, a reflection of your own humanity, your own struggle, your own longing for wholeness. You realize that the rebellion is contagious. As you break free from your own chains, you inspire others to do the same. You become a beacon for those who are still trapped in denial, a guide for those who are lost in the darkness. You see that your liberation is not just a personal victory, but a gift to the world, a ripple that spreads outward, transforming everything it touches. You begin to question the systems that profit from your self-alienation. You see how consumer culture feeds on your sense of lack, how political systems exploit your fear, how religious dogmas demand your obedience. You recognize that the true rebellion is not just internal, but external, a refusal to participate in the machinery of denial, a commitment to creating a world where wholeness is possible. You look for allies, those who are willing to face their own monsters, who are committed to the work of integration, who are unafraid of complexity. You find them in unexpected places, in the artist who paints her nightmares, in the friend who confesses his fears, in the stranger who meets your gaze without flinching. You realize that you are not alone, that the rebellion is already underway, that a new world is being born in the shadows of the old. You feel the power of this realization coursing through you, a sense of possibility, of freedom, of hope. You know that the path ahead will not be easy, that you will stumble and fall, that the monster will not be tamed overnight, but you also know that you are no longer a prisoner, no longer a victim, no longer at war with yourself. You sense that the rebellion is not a destination, but a practice, a daily commitment to honesty, to courage, to compassion. It is the willingness to face your darkness, to listen to your monster, to learn from your pain. It is the refusal to settle for a life half-lived, the insistence on claiming your full humanity, the determination to create meaning from your suffering. You realize that the monster is not your enemy, but your ally. It is the part of you that refuses to be silenced, that demands to be seen, that insists on being real. It is the source of your creativity, your resilience, your capacity for transformation. It is the part that will not let you settle for less than you are capable of. You feel the world shifting around you, as if the very fabric of reality is being rewoven. You see the cracks in the old order, the places where the light breaks through. You sense that a new story is being written, a story in which the monster is not slain but befriended, in which darkness is not denied but integrated, in which wholeness is not a fantasy but a lived reality. You stand at the threshold of this new world, the monster at your side, no longer a source of fear but a companion on the journey. You know that the rebellion is far from over, that the work of integration is never complete, but you also know that you are no longer alone, no longer lost, no longer afraid. You take a deep breath, feeling the power of your own presence, the strength of your own resolve. You are ready to break free, not by destroying your monster, but by embracing it, not by denying your darkness, but by learning from it, not by seeking perfection, but by claiming your wholeness. The rebellion has begun. The path is yours to walk. The monster is waiting. Night falls again, but this time, the darkness feels different. It is no longer a void to be feared, but a vast, silent expanse, an invitation. You lie awake, listening to the quiet pulse of your own heart, feeling the presence of the monster beside you. It is not menacing now, nor desperate for attention. It is simply there, as much a part of you as your breath, your bones, your dreams. You realize that the rebellion has brought you to the edge of something deeper, something final, a truth that has waited for you in the shadows all along. You close your eyes and let yourself drift, surrendering to the current of memory and longing that runs beneath your waking life. Images rise and fall, moments of shame, flashes of anger, the ache of old wounds. You see yourself as a child, wild and unguarded, before the world taught you to be afraid of your own depths. You see the walls you built, the masks you wore, the parts of yourself you left behind. You see the monster, not as a beast, but as a guardian, faithful, patient, waiting for you to return. A question forms in the silence, more profound than any before. What if the monster was never here to hurt you? What if it was here to protect you, to keep you whole, to remind you of what you lost when you chose safety over truth? What if every moment of pain, every act of self-sabotage, every shadow you fled was a message, a call to come home to yourself? You feel the paradox at the heart of your existence. The monster you feared is the part of you that loves you most fiercely. It is the part that refused to be exiled, the part that held onto your pain so you would not forget who you are. It is the part that demanded to be seen, to be heard, to be loved. It is the part that carried your suffering so you could survive. You realize with a shock of recognition that the monster is not your darkness, but your light, twisted, wounded, misunderstood. It is your longing for connection, your hunger for meaning, your capacity for joy. It is the source of your creativity, your empathy, your resilience. It is the wellspring of everything that makes you human. You see now that the journey was never about conquering your monster, but about reclaiming your lost self. It was about learning to hold the tension between light and shadow, to honor the complexity of your own nature, to embrace the paradox at the heart of your being. It was about discovering that true strength lies not in perfection, but in wholeness, in the willingness to be fully, unapologetically alive. You remember the words of Rainer Maria Rilke. Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us. You realize that your monster was never terrible, only misunderstood. It was the part of you that needed your compassion, your attention, your love. It was the part that waited, year after year, for you to come back and claim it. You feel a wave of grief for all the years you spent running, all the moments you lost to fear, all the parts of yourself you abandoned. But beneath the grief, there is relief, a sense of coming home, of being welcomed, of being whole. You realize that the monster was never your enemy, but your guide. It led you through the darkness so you could find the light. You see now that the ultimate truth is not a destination, but a way of being. It is the willingness to meet yourself in the places you fear most, to listen to the voices you have silenced, to love the parts of yourself you have rejected. It is the courage to be vulnerable, the strength to be honest, the grace to be imperfect. It is the realization that you are not broken, not flawed, not unworthy. You are human, complex, contradictory, magnificent. You understand, at last, that the monster is not something to be tamed or destroyed, but something to be integrated. It is the part of you that holds your deepest wounds and your greatest gifts. It is the source of your suffering and your salvation. It is the key to your freedom. You rise from your bed and move to the window, looking out at the world bathed in moonlight. You see the city sleeping, the streets empty, the sky vast and indifferent. You feel a sense of connection to the world, to yourself, to the countless others who are wrestling with their own monsters in the darkness. You realize that you are not alone, that your struggle is universal, that your journey is shared. You think of all the people who are still running, still hiding, still afraid. You wish you could tell them what you have learned, that the monster is not to be feared, but to be befriended, that the darkness is not a curse, but a gift, that wholeness is not a fantasy, but a birthright. You wish you could show them that the path to freedom runs not away from their pain, but straight through it. You know that the journey is never truly over, that the work of integration is ongoing, that the monster will always be with you, that the dance between light and shadow is eternal. But you also know that you are no longer a prisoner, no longer a victim, no longer at war with yourself. You are free, not because you have conquered your darkness, but because you have learned to love it. You feel a sense of peace, a quiet joy, a deep gratitude. You know that you will stumble, that you will fall, that you will be tempted to turn away, but you also know that you have the strength to return, the courage to face yourself, the wisdom to begin again. You know that the monster is not a threat but a companion, a reminder of your own resilience, your own capacity for transformation, your own infinite potential. You turn away from the window and move through your home, feeling the solidity of the floor beneath your feet, the warmth of the air on your skin, the steady rhythm of your breath. You are present, alive, awake. You are no longer haunted by the past, no longer paralyzed by fear, no longer defined by your wounds. You realize that the ultimate truth is both simple and profound. To befriend your inner monster is to reclaim your humanity. It is to accept that you are both light and shadow, both wounded and wise, both broken and beautiful. It is to recognize that your darkness is not a flaw, but a source of power, a wellspring of creativity, empathy, and love. You know that the world needs people who are willing to do this work, people who are unafraid of their own depths, who are willing to face their monsters, who are committed to living with honesty, courage, and compassion. You know that every act of integration, every moment of self-acceptance, every gesture of kindness ripples outward, transforming the world in ways you cannot imagine. You feel the weight of this responsibility, but also the joy. You know that you are not alone, that you are part of a great unfolding, a collective awakening, a movement toward wholeness. You know that the monster is not just yours, but everyone's, that the work of befriending it is the work of healing the world. You stand in the darkness, the monster at your side, and you feel a sense of awe. You realize that you are not separate from the world, not isolated in your suffering, not alone in your longing. You are connected to yourself, to others, to the great mystery of existence. You are part of something vast, something beautiful, something sacred. You close your eyes and take a deep breath, feeling the fullness of your own being, the richness of your own experience, the depth of your own love. You know that you are enough, just as you are. You know that you are whole, even in your brokenness. You know that you are free, even in your darkness. And as the first light of dawn breaks over the horizon, you open your eyes to a new world, a world where the monster is not a threat but a guide, where the darkness is not a prison but a path, where wholeness is not a dream but a reality. You step into the day carrying the ultimate truth with you, that to befriend your inner monster is to become fully, gloriously, unapologetically alive.